Alright guys, joining me live from somewhere in Auckland because she's on lockdown is PhD candidate and recovering transport engineer Tamara Bozovic. Tamara, welcome to the stream.
Kia ora, Jade. Thank you very much. I feel very privileged to be here in your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I told you minutes ago that we've been giving you a lot of hype, a lot of energy in the stream. I've been telling my viewers and fans how much your research is so mind blowing for someone like me. Now it's all about walking, and as part of the research that I did that Hannah gave me to do, I read one of your papers, which starts by mentioning the fact we've been walking for about 200,000 years. So, can you start by talking to us a little bit about why you're passionate about walking and use of public spaces?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for the praise. I hope I will live up to that. Well, why I'm passionate about walking? So I'm a trend. I did define myself as a recovering transport engineer. That's what I do. That's my trade. And I chose transport engineering in the first place because I was always interested in cities that are livable and interested in how transport contributes to cities being functional and just systems that do their job and make our lives easier and make us contribute to us being able to access our destinations, but also contribute to an environment that is healthy and contributes to our health. So I've always worked around how we can build better cities and retrofit cities, and so I was always interested in modes that are alternatives to car and modes that are more sustainable and healthier. And for me, walking is obviously the most basic mode. Every trip starts and ends either on foot or by wheelchair. Because that's what we do. We get out of bed and we do that. And it's just, I don't remember who said that if walking was a medicine, it would be the super drug, because it's free, it's healthy. We know that it contributes to streets that are livable. We know that we, as humans, we appreciate walking in streets where we see other people walking. We know that on foot, it's easy to pop into a shop or pop into a cafe. We can interact with others. It's space efficient. It's CO2 neutral. You name it. It just ticks all the boxes. And I think it's also a very important mode that is for social inclusion. So it's really everybody's mode, and could allow really everybody to access their destinations or at least their public transport.
Thank you so much, and that makes so much sense. It goes without saying I could do with being a little bit healthier myself. Now,
we all could.
Just for clarity, when you referred to walking, you are actually including people with mobility impairment as well?
Absolutely. And this is just for shortening, I say walking, but I absolutely include the use of wheelchair or the use of any mobility device. And I think that walking absolutely needs to be inclusive of people of all ages and abilities. And we speak of the A to 80 cities. I would like cities to be 5 to 95 or 5 to 100, and I would like them to be inclusive for all levels of physical ability or all special requirements. So yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, there's so much we could talk about in terms of your research, and we'll definitely loop back around on that. But can you tell us a little bit about your opinion on New Zealand, maybe Auckland as well? How do we compare in terms of our utilization of public space and walkability?
Yes. So I think New Zealand has inherited a system that is very car dominated. So New Zealand system has been in very large part planned and built. So let's say planned in the 20s, 30s, 40s, built in the 40s,
Yeah.
50s, 60s, 70s, and so it's not specific to New Zealand. In this era,
Yeah.
the car was seen as a symbol of progress and a symbol of future, and all around the world, even Paris, parts of old Paris were going to be destroyed to make place for high rises and basically urban state highways, because that was how we were imagining the future. In the future, the car was going to make us free and make access easy. I think the difference for places like New Zealand or the US is that they were less built than places like Europe. In European towns and cities were basically, well, there was only so much room for maneuver. Here there was a lot of room, and so New Zealand built a lot of highways, built a lot of low density suburbs, because that was the idea, that you could live in your detached house and hop in your car and hop into the city or into work. So
So,
there was a huge swath of infrastructure built around that. Yeah.
so on that basis, I'm just wondering whether you agree. Is having so many cars in a country like New Zealand going to be sustainable in the future? I don't imagine it would be, but I'm not as smart as you.
No, so no, it's not about being smart. And I realize that, well, I answered partially your question. So the system makes it actually sometimes quite difficult to walk, because it can feel unsafe to cross roads where traffic
Certainly.
passes really fast, and where you have really long distances to cross, and where you know that there is the traffic movements are complicated and you might feel at risk. But also your destinations might be far away, or you might have to walk through streets that are lonely, empty, and dark at night. So now to answer your question, if the number of cars is sustainable, well, no. New Zealand has relies predominantly on cars, and we know that uh, this is not a sustainable way to go forward. But I think the difficulty around this is really, and that's really the question that interests me, is how do we transition from a system that is a very dominantly
Mm.
car legacy to something that is different? And something that is different is something that we are discussing now. So the government policy statement is just in draft now, and speaks again about the transport system as a whole, allowing us to reach our destinations. So the question is really, well, who cannot reach their destinations now, and how can this be improved? And another aspect of the GPS is, of course, climate sustainability. So, of course, we want a transport system that aligns with our climate commitment. So, how do we get there? And I don't underestimate at all the difficulty of this question, because we really have systemic issues around a system that is very car dominant, and that we need to transition, and we need to prioritize what we do to transition to something else.
So as I said at the top of the show, you're a recovering transport engineer. So you've had a background in serving organisations that directly uh, apply transport settings to Auckland City.
Hmm.
Have you seen a transition to a better application of transport in Auckland City, would you say, or is it moving in a strange direction that you didn't anticipate?
No, I think Auckland, especially the Auckland Design Office, that I was really surprised to see dismantled. Auckland Design Office has been really championing uh, best practice and championing redesign of streets, and redesign that is played with temporary elements, so that we can trial redesign and see how it works, and tweak it and improve it. So I think Auckland has definitely been championing the rethinking the public spaces and also the public transports. I think um, public transport connections that are always better, and the likes of for instance, Northern Busway. This is really a best case, a really good practice in terms of having a clear idea and implementing it, and really having something that serves its purpose. So I think Auckland has really been championing this good the best practice, and I think Auckland also doesn't really have the choice but to champion the best practice. But really, I think anybody who there are figures. Let's putting the figures aside. I think if anybody commutes by car into Auckland at peak hour, they witness every day that there is just not so much room for additional cars. So if Auckland CBD is to develop in terms of more businesses, more activity, more jobs, we just see in our everyday life that this cannot happen by car because the roads are full and there is just no more room. And I think that we could also agree that it's better use of Auckland CBD space to have shops and businesses and living than storage for a car. So it forces us to think, okay, well, we want to develop business and activity and everything that is happening, and it just cannot happen by car. The car is just very space inefficient. So yeah, Auckland has hit this limit of what can be done by car, and now we really need to think outside of the box.
Tamara, we do have a couple of questions from the audience that we took earlier, but there's more come up now. Would you be happy to answer some questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then we can go back to my ones.
Mm-hmm.
How would the more rural areas be? How can the rural areas be better in regards to public transport? Being in a city that relies on a rural community, a lot of people rely on private vehicles or
Mm-hmm.
farm vehicles.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for the rural areas, I think we need to distinguish different cases. So, well, first, I think that there is really a lot of scope for towns and villages to be a bit more dense, so that people can live closer to their shops and their amenities, and so they don't necessarily have to rely on cars. Bicycle is also possibly has a lot of potential um, for certain demographics. It's not as inclusive as walking, but definitely has potential. And by bicycle, you can quite easily do 3, 5, maybe even 10 kilometers with an e-bike. So I think there is potential to think of these local connections of how you living close to a town or close to a village, these connections between where people live and where people go to school or shop, and have really a master plan kind of thinking around those rural areas. And another aspect will be longer distance transport. So longer distance transport also in New Zealand is quite underdeveloped. Um, and there would be quite a potential if you live, say, in a town that is 20 minutes from a larger urban area. A more efficient public transport would mean that high school kids maybe could go to another high school in the town, or could go study in the other town, or you could comfortably live in a smaller town and work in a bigger town. And this is the kind of connection that are underdeveloped and now can be really quite balancing. And so I don't blame people for doing them by car. And in the last case of
When you refer to longer distance transport, are you talking about like bullet trains or things like that?
no, so I'm really not talking about technology and about means. I'm really talking about connecting places that are, say, 15, 20 kilometers apart.
Okay.
And I think that's a very interesting question because in New Zealand I've seen quite a lot of um, jumping to solutions. And in terms of public transport, that can definitely be a thing. And everybody has seen a bullet train or has seen a subway or has seen
Yeah.
X or Y or Z. And then we can have like, we want bullet train or we want bullet train. And I think for me, this is really the problem with this is that we should first look at what should public transport do. Should it be should it be faster than the
Yeah.
car? Should it be and it's
Yeah.
and really have a job description for public transport. And then starting from the job description, we can look at 10, 15, 20 possibilities, and we can look at how they stack up against the job description. And what we tend to do is take one candidate and be like, oh well, this is candidate C, we like him, and we're not really sure about the job description, but we like the candidate C. So I think that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. And another one from the audience. I think this is really interesting. Tell me if you're not across this though. So we had a question from the audience around. Can you give us your thoughts specifically about New Zealand or Auckland if you prefer? Oh, well, it does talk about regional parks. What are your thoughts on the accessibility of regional or state parks? Now, just to give a bit of context, there was a reference to a regional park having an accessible walkway, but the hut or the accommodation that you can stay in, there was a debate about that whether that needed to be accessible. So just wanted your
Mm.
thoughts on regional park walkability and accessibility.
Yes, well, this is a bit out of my domain. My domain, and I am a bit of a city rat, so I don't. This is a bit out of my scope, but just
Sure.
I would say overall, I really advocate for accessibility for everyone, and I think that I really like the idea of accessible by design, and I think that at the very least we should not make things inaccessible by design. So
Amazing.
this probably applies to regional banks as well.
Amazing. I want to ask, how much does the environment inform the research that you do and the advice that you give?
When you mean environment, do you
No, no,
mean?
I mean like nature, the environment. You know,
Hmm.
you,
Yes. Well, my research starts broad and then narrows down, and so my first my, my first question and my first framing of the my theoretical network or theoretical framework, sorry, was really why do people walk? What is it that motivates people to do? If, say, you have your supermarket 300 meters or 500 meters away, what motivates you to get there? And what makes this a pleasant experience? And there is a lot of research suggesting that we as humans, um, I think that will be news for no one. The nature, having a sight of nature is really positive for our well-being, and it's also contributing to the appeal. And it doesn't even need to be really in the nature. It can just be the views of a landscape or the views of natural environment. So I think that it definitely contributes to the pleasantness of our environment, and we know that it is also a very an element of urban design that ticks a lot of boxes. It takes the box of um, ecological connections for different species to connect from, say, waterways to bushes. It also, in terms of rainfall, we know that if a city is completely asphalted, in terms of rainfall, we will have a lot of water coming out of the city and making storms, as opposed to having vegetation that can absorb part of this water and just contribute to a system more um, that is more of an ecosystem. So I'm definitely as much as I am a city rat, I definitely advocate for nature in the city for our well-being and health.
That's amazing. Now, my next question. I'm aware you sent me an email saying that you're currently getting ready to gather some data around the lockdown and
Hmm.
people's was it people's mobility during the
No,
lockdown, or can you help
no,
me
actually
understand?
not. Yes, yes. So actually, I have two projects. So I just added myself to. So first, I interviewed 56 Aucklanders before the lockdown. I interviewed people of all ages and the people who are disabled and non-disabled around their perceptions of their neighborhoods and walking, and really what makes walking appealing and what might be aspects that they struggle with. And so now with the lockdown, I'm aiming at asking them if they would answer a survey around how they perceive their neighborhoods now with the lockdown. And the idea I would, so I'm not really interested in the behavior because we know that behaviors have changed, but behaviors have changed because of a lot of different parameters. One of which being that we need to stay at home, right? And maybe another being that if we are locked at home, we will feel really compelled to go out because maybe it's a bit of the freedom that we have. So I'm not going to investigate this directly because it would be quite hard to gather some insights. But what interests me really is how people's perceptions of their streets and neighborhoods have changed now that the traffic has drastically reduced, and now that also we have more
Yeah.
people walking and cycling in the streets. Also, arguably in some neighborhoods, we have more of the presence of police. So it's really a lot of these tuning parameters of our streets suddenly have been changed. And this is something, when you experiment in terms of medical research, say, you experiment on a new drug and you will try more or higher or lower dosages, and you will try people with drug and without drug,
Mm.
and you see the difference. In terms of transport, we almost never have the occasion to do this because we study the system as it is, and it is as it is. And now suddenly there is this change. So I was really interested in how people
Are
perceive
you
this.
saying the lockdown presents a unique opportunity for researchers as a control test?
Yes, I see it like this. I see it as a lockdown has a lot of course implications, but one of the implications is that suddenly our streets function differently, and I was really interested in seeing how people perceive them. And so this is my
Yeah.
one idea is to go back to my participants, and another project is that I'm working on with a group of international researchers. We are looking at what people tweet about their neighborhoods during the lockdown and see what maybe ideas associations come and what people tweet about, um, if it's positive, negative, what aspects they notice. So this is something that is really in draft and that is being worked on now. But I think there is a lot of interest around this. Yes.
Are you telling me that as part of your research you get to spend all day on Twitter?
No, well, actually, I will tell you, it's actually worse. What I do is I spend all day writing code, and then my computer will go mine
Okay.
to Twitter. But there will definitely be a lot of reading because I think as researchers we also need to immerse ourselves in the data. But we are looking at ways of having both human interaction with the data and a mass gathering of data and a mass analysis. So we are looking at ways of combining both, having to have some insights. Because at the end of the day, it all comes back to the initial question of how do we build better cities and what can we learn about this situation where we have less traffic and more people in the streets. How can we learn in terms of how it contributes to our perceptions and our well-being and our the appeal that we see in our streets?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank
So,
you.
so we're coming to the end of our time, but I gotta
Hmm.
ask, what are some barriers that you've faced in terms of sharing your data with decision makers. Has there been any barriers to being able to do that? I suppose the more direct question is, what has the response been to your research?
I think the response to my research is there is. I think I see quite some interest from
Great, that's great news.
decision makers and managers. Um, but I think there is also a difficulty, and I don't underestimate the difficulty of facing systemic issues. And I think that some people, we are. First, as humans, it's easier to continue in a sort of way that we've been rolling in the last years or decades. So there is some kind of we know how it works, and if from the outside we're saying, well, maybe we need to change the way we do business. I acknowledge that this is something that can be quite difficult, and it's definitely a difficult question. Just where do we start? What do we do? So I see these two things. I see a lot of interest, and I also see a bit of concern and doubt around what do we if we are to do things differently. How do we do them, and what do we do?
So a bit of fear around innovation, like not being able to see the future.
Well, yeah. Well, fear and the way we also have institutionalized barriers around how we evaluate projects, and if we evaluate projects, say in terms of time saving only, or the way the projects are assessed has been developed mainly around traffic. So we also have barriers around just making the case for projects that are not traffic, and we also have barriers around. For instance, for traffic, we know exactly where people drive, where are the hotspots, where is red, where is orange, where is green. For walking, we don't know. We don't know where are those areas where there is potential for walking, but people don't walk. I would like to see a map like this where it just gives us an insight of, oh, wait, this is a potential. And if we develop something here, we should take into account walking. It doesn't exist. So it relies on individuals who may or may not get out of their way to gather this data, and it's really hard. So we do have some institutionalized or systemic struggles of for making the case and implementing change.
So then, so too would be the issue around mobility impairment. I recall a conversation you and I had probably at the end of last year when I visited your office. You said there was virtually no data around people with disabilities, and that you were trying to contribute to gathering some of that.
Yes, well, first, around walking in general, it's really, I think, quite fascinating to think that walking is, on the one hand, completely universal and relative to us all, and on the other hand, we're still not sure about why people choose to walk or choose not to walk. So there is really quite little data and little understanding. And in the literature itself, we know that we don't know enough about people with disabilities, and we know that people with disabilities will have higher barriers to access, but we really don't know enough about what these barriers are and what they mean in terms of people maybe not accessing their destinations just because it's too hard. And the one piece of data that I mentioned when we spoke is that Auckland Transport gathers a lot of data about active modes, which is a precious source of information, and I've used it in my PhD. So this survey asks people about their perceptions of their environment and the trips that they do by all modes. But people with disabilities are not asked about the questions of their perceptions, and I thought that this was really a huge gap.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No. So it is a huge gap because the population for whom we need to understand more. So yes, I really hope that this will be gathered. But now, at least the Household Travel Survey has started asking people about their difficulties, and they started using an excerpt from the Washington Group short-set questions to ask people's levels of and types of impairment. So this is a really good step in the right direction, and the census does the same, so that we can have a better understanding of how different groups of populations might have specific struggles and specific barriers to access.
I gotta ask, do you understand how transformative your research could be in the future? Are you prepared to receive a Nobel Prize?
No, no, that's absolutely not. I thank you very much for I'm always amazed by to hear the interest, and I love the conversations we have. But and I just hope to do a bit. I hope, as a transport planner, I hope to bring back something to the practice, to the transport planning and urban design and public health practices. So I just that's my aim to contribute something in terms of knowledge and understanding. And well, my role is then limited, because then it's in the hands of those who. So we will see where I will be after this, in the research or in the practice. But I definitely will try to contribute to some meaningful change.
I gotta say, we had the links that you sent across, and I definitely read those before our conversation this morning, but I struggled to go deep into it in terms of my questioning. So would you mind if I shared the links to that article in your paper with my audience?
Oh yes, please do. And yes, I really saw it just for the context. So it was my first paper is in press, so I was very happy about this. And this link that I sent, I just made a sort of blog post kind of to break down and to just introduce the research. So yes, I'm happy for you to share it. Absolutely.
Awesome. And we've got a question. One more question here. Ants wants to know: are you engaged with the Access Alliance at this stage?
No, I'm not. I'm following their work, and I think I see my activity very aligned with what they do. I'm not formally part of the alliance, but I think it's really. I think both streams of work are very aligned, and I'm very. Yes, I'm following closely what they are doing. So yes, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, Hannah wants to ask a question.
I actually just want to...
Yes.
Hi, Tamara.
Hi, Hannah.
I just want to thank you, because I think your work is... I second what Jade said.
Nobel Prize on the way.
Honestly, I've had so many struggles with council and with Auckland Transport. Just to explain with them that... Yes, I've got a disability and I like to walk. And I recently actually almost went flying down the street and grazed myself because concrete wasn't even, so it wasn't safe for me to walk. So I think your work is so important, and I really appreciate it. And a lot of people have to learn from it. I think a lot of people listen to you. So it's great that you're following the Access Alliance, but I think a lot of people will listen to you, so thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think, and this made me think that we didn't really mention road safety, but this is definitely such a crucial aspect. And we know that the numbers of death and serious injuries might be decreasing, but not for walking. And for walking, we are so far behind, if anything else, because we don't know where people walk. And so we are reacting to crashes and we are reacting to deaths. And if we have 2 people who died in a certain spot, we don't know if it's 2 out of 2 who tried to cross or 2 out of 20 million. And it would be different, right? If it's 2 out of 2 or 2 out of 2. And we don't know. So I think this is so important, and this is just another justification for us getting more into understanding what people do, what people don't do, and being really proactive about having 0 deaths and 0 pedestrian deaths, and we are really far away from that.
Great.
That's great. I gotta ask, so if my followers, people in the chat wanted to contribute to your work or support you in any way, can you tell us how to do that? And obviously I'll include whatever information in the description in my video as well. We'd love to know how to support you going forward.
Oh, that's amazing! Well, so they can contact me via Twitter. And I finished for now my series of interviews. So I'm analyzing the data I have. But I'm very happy for people to get in touch, and I will share my research. And I think it will be great. I would really like also to empower the community. So I would like to, going forward, transmit my results so that people can themselves, if they want to see meet their local authorities and share this data with them, and if they want to advocate for better streets and neighborhoods and better access.
Awesome. Just finally, obviously it's been mind-blowing for me. I probably made a terrible podcast host during this session because I just love listening to you. But I gotta say, every time we get together, Tamara, it's amazing. And just finally, you know, would you be interested in coming back on at some stage?
I would be. So first, it was such an honor to be here, and it's really a privilege, and I know how much of following you have, and you've had amazing guests. So I'm very privileged, and I would be more than happy and honored to come back. So yes, anytime.
That'd be great. And last question that I like to ask people that I've been forgetting to do: did you have fun this morning?
Yes, it was great. It was a great chat, and I think it's great for me to get out of my books and my computer, and I think it's great for any PhD student to just come back to what is it we're doing actually? What's the purpose? So yes, please ask those questions, and I'm very happy about it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Tamara, it's been really great having you along this morning. Lot of praise for you in the chat. We hope you enjoy your Easter weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great. And yes, I hope everybody enjoyed their Easter weekend in their bubbles.
Awesome. We'll talk to you again, Tamara. Bye for
now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I want to get this right so I don't blow people's ears out. There we are. Woo! How's that?